Well, it's my pleasure to welcome back J R Nyquist. Welcome back, Mr. Nyquist.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Well, I think our audience knows you well. You've spoken many times about the international situation, and we'd like to ask you about the situation in China and the prospects for peace or war with the U.S.
Well, of course, as everyone knows, the ruling ideology in China is Marxism-Leninism. And Mao built the Marxist-Leninist system in China as communism with Chinese characteristics. And after Mao's death, Deng Xiaoping said it's glorious to be rich, and they did their own NEP. NEP is the new economic policy of Lenin. After the Russian Civil War, Lenin said, we don't know how to build a communist economy. Marx didn't tell us, so we're going to retreat into state capitalism. And that's the system that the Soviet Union had, and that's the system that China has. And of course, the Soviet Union collectivized their agriculture, but that was kind of undone because in the Cultural Revolution, the Soviet structures that were set up in China for that were kind of torn down, and it paved the way for China to have a market in agricultural goods, which allowed them to feed themselves. And of course, they convinced the West, they convinced us that they're really capitalist and that we need to do business with them and that we can't resist their cheap labor and the fact that they don't care if they pollute their groundwater or they pollute their air, and that we can build everything over there cheaper because of lack of regulation and cheaper labor. And that has corrupted us. And that has been China's grand strategy to get the capital they need to build the biggest navy in the world, to build nuclear weapons that they're now building very quickly, and to create the infrastructure for a military system that can destroy the United States.
Okay, well, that's a lot to unpack, but I mean, isn't it true that virtually every major corporation that has been started in the United States is very, very involved in China? I mean, there's Apple and Microsoft and Google, and I mean, I think all of them are. That's a huge market that they want. They want to keep that.
Well, certainly Microsoft, selling computers and software. Selling software. Sorry. China has 4 times the population of the United States, so they think, well, it's 4 times the market. And when China surpasses the United States in its economy, which people have been expecting for a long time, we don't want to be left out of that market. Right. What they're failing to realize is that the leaders of China are communists. The market is being used by them as a way to penetrate the United States, corrupt businessmen, by politicians or influence politicians in order to basically defeat us strategically. And that is how they've been proceeding for the last, 30, 40 years. And we have pretty much succumbed to their attack because it was just, whether it's big pharma or whether it's, major corporations like Microsoft and Google, or BMW, Mercedes, whatever car company goes in to China, they basically get raped because China says, "Oh, you're breaking our laws. You owe us $1 billion or $2 billion." And of course, these corporations have made a lot of money in China, so they suddenly realize there goes their profits, but they're still making it okay. And China then also demands that they transfer ideas, technology, and so they steal copyrights and they steal patents and they steal material that is intellectual property and appropriate it. And so they don't have to spend the same on research or have to pay certain fees because they don't respect our basic laws that you invented that, you own that. You've got the copyright to that or the patent to that. You need to be paid. They don't respect any of that. So their system is riding roughshod over us. And then they've lowered their currency. They have really two currencies. They've lowered their trading currency down so low that we can't compete. They have manipulative trade practices to knock out industries. Let's say they want to make all our shoes, or they want to make all of our cell phones. They dump on our market, and they make it so cheap that nobody here in the U.S. can make it. Right?
Mm-hmm.
And so we don't have protection. We have all these Republicans and even these Democrats that believe in free trade. So what happens to us? We get deindustrialized.
Mm.
We lose our industry. So that now China in shipbuilding, it's cheaper to build ships in China. Well, now we can't keep up in terms of building our Navy. So the Chinese are they are able to build a Navy every year the size of the French Navy, and we can't even keep up with our needs. And we're dependent on China for many things.
Now, I was going to ask you, I mean, aren't there kind of essential components of all kinds of things in America that are made in China? I mean,
well, there are essential components of things that China needs too, and China needs food. That's the really essential thing, because they can only, given the flooding and alternating floods and droughts that China's hit with, in any given year, China maybe can feed 60% of their population, maybe only 50. So they have to import a lot of food, but there's also configured chips that Japan, South Korea, and Taiwan make, and the U.S. makes. We're really high tech, but we let them have access to all that. Meanwhile, they make the bulk items. And the thing is this has gotten out of control, and they've gotten so much influence with our politicians and with our large corporations that they're literally riding roughshod over us, and there's no containing them. And then you add to that their allies, the Russians, and the other countries, socialist countries that are aligned with them. And you've got this real problem that socialists in the United States have the upper hand and are getting the upper hand. And the U.S. hasn't built a nuclear warhead since 1992. We haven't even tested one since then. Nobody knows really what the state of the U.S. nuclear deterrent is. And now China is going to have, within 18 months to 2 years, a nuclear arsenal larger than ours, as Russia's nuclear arsenal is larger than ours. And Russia and China are united. They're combined. China is helping Russia in Ukraine, although they deny it and say it's propaganda. If anyone says that, that's because they don't want sanctions applied to them. But I'm afraid that we need to apply sanctions to China yesterday, because if we continue to trade with them, they will bury us with it.
All right, and also I want to ask you about. I've read articles about the spying of. My understanding is that they penetrated the computer networks for the State Department and even, I don't know if it's correct, the Department of Defense.
Well, for 20 years, Chinese hackers have gotten into computers in the Defense Department and have gotten into government computers and corporate computers. I mean, the Chinese cyber warfare and espionage in this country is massive. I mean, we have thousands and thousands of Chinese here working. In fact, in our government labs, I think the largest ethnic group working in our government labs as scientists are Chinese nationals.
Really?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, look at Emory University. I had someone who got their PhD at Emory saying that, 15% are from mainland China, and they're from Communist Party elite families. And the Emory University feeds the CDC in Georgia, right? and other, the National Institutes of Health, all these. So if you're going to do a biological attack on the United States,
Right.
wouldn't you be infiltrating Emory and the CDC and the National Institutes of Health? And wouldn't you be trying to compromise or buy up people like Fauci and certain scientists? And wouldn't you want to be compromising big pharma by offering them really cheap production of pharmaceutical ingredients and vaccine precursors so that you could get into there? Because after all, this is the vector for a bioattack, right? You use a country's own health system against itself in a bioattack. I mean, that's what you would do. Didn't we just see something along those lines, maybe?
Yeah, maybe. So tell me, I've heard about a race-specific, the attempt to develop viruses or biological attack agents that can target certain genetic, races or ethnic groups. Or do you know anything about that?
Yeah, the Chinese are, and you can look. There are researchers here in the U.S. And the True the Vote folks ran into this, and some of the data they found that the Chinese were gathering massive data on Americans, including DNA data on Americans and on Americans' medical records, and Americans' financial data. The danger of China collecting DNA data on Americans is that they could design a genetic-specific bioweapon. We don't know how the technology is, what the state of it is in China or anywhere, because it's secret. It's a secret type of research, or whether it's ultimately going to be possible to develop such weapons. But we know that certain genetic profiles are more vulnerable to certain kinds of diseases, right? Given your history. Right. So you've got, among Black African Americans, you got sickle cell anemia. Right. You've got certain things that American Indians, when Columbus and the Europeans first came to the Americas, American Indians didn't have any history of immunity to smallpox. So smallpox hit the Native Americans and just wiped them out by the millions because they had no immunity to it. Right. So you look at the genetic background. What do they have more or less immunity to? What are they more or less vulnerable to? And you can sort of make your attack on that basis. This was mentioned in a speech by former Chinese Defense Minister Chiao Chen about 20 years ago. General Chi talked about biological weapons that could target specific ethnic groups. And that, they didn't know how long it would take to develop this science, but this might be a way to go against the United States.
All right. Well, okay. Let's talk a little bit about the COVID pandemic. And I know there's a lot of entanglement. There's the University of North Carolina. There's the Wuhan Institute. There's our own Department of Defense somehow being involved with our response to COVID. Can you unpack that for us?
Yeah, well, as everyone knows, the COVID-19 virus came out of China.
Right.
And people like Dr. Li Mengyan will tell you it came from the lab. There's been, Fauci broke the law, I think. I think he lied. I think he knew perfectly well that virus came out of the Wuhan, level 4 lab, biolab. And that's really a biological warfare lab in reality. And it's this virus, the only question is, was it released on purpose or did it escape accidentally? And the Chinese have these different tiers of disinformation saying, oh, it came from a wet market. And then, you were a tinfoil hat conspiracy person if you said it came out of the lab. But the evidence shows it came out of that lab. And then they have the story about how it escaped the lab. But I think rather, I no longer believe anything coming out of China, where they have these alternate stories. Look, China has a very severe economic problem due to the fact that they had a one-child policy. You have two parents, they're only allowed to have one child. What happens after 40 years? You have one child supporting two elderly parents, right? So now you're upside down in your population, and you have to support, you have twice as many elderly people, and how do you support that? And you're a socialist system. You're basically a market socialist system, or state capitalism, however you want to describe it. And so they have to take care of these. Well, what is the best solution? To have a disease that sweeps through China and mainly kills elderly people, right?
Okay. Sounds like New York State. Okay.
Does that sound vaguely familiar? A disease like that? Where then you lock people in their apartments and then you even don't feed them on purpose so they die there.
Right.
So that you are actually killing off that elderly population as fast as you can so you can right your boat, so that you can make your economy work. And then and the fringe benefit is that virus goes abroad. Right. And then if you can convince the blackmailed officials or the people you've recruited in the enemy, through the World Health Organization is just a puppet of China, right? So through the World Health, you impose lockdowns that severely damage the U.S. economy, the economy of the NATO countries, the economy of the countries that would traditionally are the enemies of communism. If you damage these economies sufficiently, you weaken them while you're building up and you're actually using the virus to strengthen your economy.
Right.
And then there's the question of why, when you have great antivirals like ivermectin and hydrochloroquine,
right,
you're pushing vaccines. By the way, experimental vaccines are always problematic in terms of their safety, and which are not properly safety tested. And the pharmaceutical companies are, basically protected by law against being sued if these vaccines prove harmful. So why are you pushing these when they are perfectly decent? And then the medical community is pushing like remdesivir, which is as an antiviral, which kills the patients, right?
Right.
And intubation, which is not the right strategy. When you can give the patient ivermectin or hydrochloroquine and zinc, and you can contain the infection that way. The question is why? Whenever you see some piece of nonsense that's harmful, right, whether it's the global warming science, which I think 1,600 scientists just wrote a letter saying this is garbage science.
Right.
It is. There's not a consensus. This is nonsense. This is Climate Uncertainty and Risk: Rethinking Our Response by Judith Curry. This just came out this year.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And Judith Curry's book is like, well, I kind of believed this at first, but then when I looked at it, it's a handful of scientists who are politically on the far left, right?
Right.
Who are pushing this as an attack on capitalism. If you can get the West to shut down its diesel production and its gasoline production, and you can shut down the power plants, you can basically shut down the Western economies and starve everybody in the West, and then just wipe us out, collapse our economies. By our own believing this narrative, we're wiping ourselves out for them.
Yeah, I totally understand what you're talking about, but my question is our own Department of Defense, my understanding is that our own Department of Defense was in charge of our response to COVID, that Deborah Birx was apparently chosen by or directed by people in the our own Department of Defense. I'm just curious if you've heard anything about that.
Yeah, well, you're talking about the wilderness of mirrors. Look, bureaucracies are wilderness. It's like a forest, a bureaucracy. Right. And you have all these narratives. See, the communists, if I was China and I was attacking the United States, what would happen if we found out that China was doing it and that you were killing millions of Americans? What would be the response? Would we nuke China? Because that's officially the policy of the United States. If China attacks us with a bioweapon, our policy is to respond with nuclear weapons.
Right.
So if you're China, you don't want to get caught doing this, do you? So what's the number one thing you have to do? You have to have a patsy. You have to infiltrate American intelligence, American Pentagon, the CDC, the National Institutes of Health. You have to infiltrate it. You have to get agents there, and you have to get and since you're trading with America and Big Pharma, you have to get those people to compromise themselves in some way. And then you have to sort of set them up so it looks like they did it.
Okay.
Because then when, let's say, this vaccine or other vaccines, they find out that 10 million or 100 million Americans are going to die because they were vaccinated in response to a pandemic. I'm not saying that that's the case here. Although I think if I'm a Chinese general, I'm thinking, I kind of want to do that. I want to evolve towards that, but I got to be careful again not to get caught. So you have to evolve these narratives that make it all the fault of the Defense Department or DARPA or the CDC or Mr. Fauci, put it all on them. But what you've done is you've spent years cultivating these people to work with you on viruses and to work with you on, let's defend the world against another, pandemic like the pandemic that happened 100 years ago. Let's start thinking ahead. And then you lure them in and you give them money. You compromise them. Then you compromise them because then they do stupid stuff like send a virus to China to be to have gain of function.
Right.
And then they say, well, the Chinese go, we aren't trying to attack you with a bioweapon. Your own Pentagon is. Now think about how absurd that is. The Pentagon exists to defend us.
Right.
Why would the Pentagon attack us? So you get these narratives that say the CIA killed Kennedy. You mean the letters CIA? Everybody in the CIA? What people in the CIA? No, it's the KGB agents in our government working with the KGB, working with the Chinese communists. It's the communists doing it. It's right. The communists stupid. All these narratives are stupid because every one of these narratives, the suckers miss the people who are really attacking them. So you're going to blame an American. You're going to blame Fauci. Figure out how the Chinese compromised Fauci or how they tricked Fauci or how they tricked us into doing ourselves in. Everybody's a dupe. I'm sorry. We're all dupes. You have these narratives, the capitalists, there's a conspiracy above communism. The capitalists are doing it. Look at the John Birch Society. They've been saying for years that communism is a capitalist conspiracy. So who do they see as the enemy? Capitalists, the same enemy the communists have, right?
Okay, I see.
That's not a coincidence, by the way, that we end up, this is called active measures. This is the brilliance of the communists, is they get us to blame ourselves when they have been doing this to destroy us.
Well, let me ask you about another narrative, okay? You have Google, you have the World Economic Forum.
Communist fronts, by the way.
Okay, well,
you know what a communist front is. So Klaus Schwab has a bust of Lenin in his library. And by the way, it's a private organization. How many nuclear weapons does Klaus Schwab have? He's a nobody. He's just a guy who runs this NGO and says that China's political system is the model we should be following. Well, that means he's really a spokesman for China. And he's been best buddies with Putin for many years. Right. He started as a protege of Henry Kissinger, and Henry Kissinger was, oh my gosh, accused by Britain's leading spy in communist Poland of being recruited by the GRU in 1945 when he was Sergeant Henry A. Kissinger. So that's the pedigree of, we want to say America did it. What do you mean? All of us together did it? The CIA did it. You mean everyone in the CIA is in on a conspiracy? No. The problem is the communists engage in something called infiltration, subversion, active measures. They infiltrate a system. They do bad stuff. They have agents who are nominally Americans or might work for the CIA. He's a double agent, right? He works for the CIA, but he's really a KGB agent. So if he does something, is the CIA at fault?
No,
or it's the KGB doing it, right?
Yeah, okay. I mean, I do see your point.
See what I'm saying? Klaus Schwab is just a KGB agent working with the Chinese.
The problem, of course, is that there are a lot of corporate leaders, heads of heads of state, probably Trudeau, who essentially they certainly been influenced by him.
What is Trudeau's relationship to Fidel Castro? Do you have any?
Well, I heard that he's the son of Fidel.
He looks just like him, doesn't he? And his mom allegedly had an affair with Fidel just before he was born.
Okay.
So who is he? Who is Trudeau? See, the thing is that the question is, and we don't know. I'm not saying that Trudeau is Fidel Castro's son, but it is a funny rumor. Look, yes, Bill Gates wanted, when he was head of Microsoft, he wanted to get into the Chinese market. He goes to China and they treat him like gold. And they basically recruited him. Bill Gates is essentially an agent of China. They celebrate him. They've made him a hero in China. Bill Gates is a hero in China. When Jiang Zemin came to see George W. Bush on one of his trips, he went and saw Bill Gates in Washington State before he went to Washington, D.C. Right? Okay. So the thing is that you can capture the brilliance of the communists is by pretending to be capitalists, they can capture businessmen. Oh, you don't want to miss out on this deal, Mr. Corporate Head, because we got a factory you built in China and you're making tons of money off of it. And with this cheap Chinese labor, oh, you wouldn't want to lose us to nationalize your factory, would you? Now you're on the hook, right? Okay. So you got to understand these stupid, it isn't, look, everybody's a dupe. There is a difference between a dupe and a winning agent. A dupe is a person who's been tricked. And the problem with all of our narratives on the right is we want to make the dupe into the conspirator.
Okay.
All these dupes are doing it. No, they're too stupid to do any of this. Besides, they're just motivated to make money. What is the head of a corporation supposed to do? He's supposed to make money for the investors. This is all out of the way. The idea that corporate America wants to pauperize and murder everyone. Oh, it's a conspiracy to depopulate the planet. All the executives want to do it. Why would an executive want to kill his customers? That would kind of ruin his bottom line, wouldn't it? So the thing is we're not thinking this through. There's a sociology of knowledge here. And and here's the guilt. The corporate executives are being duped by the communists into adopting things and doing things that harm us. And then we're duped into believing that our corporate executives are the ones that are doing it and not the ones that are being tricked. So we're being tricked into believing that our business people are the bad guys, and our business people are tricked into harming us. And where both sides are missing that it's the Chinese, it's the communists, it's the Russians that are doing all this. And we're so stupid. We don't put two and two together.
All right. Okay. Well, let me. I accept what you're saying. Mm-hmm. And I guess my question would be, I mean, no rational person wants to have a war with another.
And no rational person wants to poison his own family in his own country.
No. Okay, I understand. But right? Let me finish. Okay. No rational person wants to have a war, particularly with a country that has nuclear weapons. So my question to you is, how do we unravel this? How do we unravel this without several billion people being killed or harmed in some way or starved to death? I mean, I from what you've said, we have so much engagement. We're already penetrated business, government, media. I mean, the infiltration, subversion. I mean, it has been, from what you're saying, quite successful. And
somewhat successful.
Okay.
But they've had failures. See, look, don't scare yourself. General Thomas Jackson, the Confederate general, who was probably the greatest general they had a lot of good generals, but he was kind of a military genius. He had this saying. He said, "Never take counsel of your fears."
Okay.
So this is what I see on the right. And I see it with, people like Dave Hodges on the Common Sense Show. they're completely about scaring people out of their wits. We should be concerned, and we should be afraid of what is happening. But you cannot make your enemy 10 feet tall. You can't make them all powerful. You can't say that they're geniuses and we're all idiots, even though we've behaved like idiots. They have feet of clay too. They make mistakes too. They miscalculate too. And it turns out the West, our society works. It's extremely powerful society. We have tremendous wealth. We have tremendous science. And those people over there, Russia goes to invade Ukraine, and their military is not able to do it. And they've demoralized themselves. And all they can do is tell lies over in Russia about what's happening there. And China would like to invade Ukraine. Would like to invade Taiwan. But they just don't have the capacity, because under a dictatorship where the government lies to you, people know the government's lying. They don't trust the government. And so the government, there's a low morale, there's a low cooperation. And because the people at the top think they know everything and want to tell everybody at the bottom, they don't listen. So everything gets screwed up in China. In the economy, look at how screwed up China's economy is right now. That's because that's part of the nature of the same system, which is the system that is able to dupe us. We have to realize that if they were as efficient as we were, we'd already be dead.
Okay.
But their ability to spread lies is their chief talent, which also sabotages themselves. And so you need to defeat lies is the truth and some clarity, and you have to calmly analyze these things, and you have to say, yeah, these are serious attacks. And it's like this, you see what they're doing with global warming. They're basically trying to shut down diesel, would cripple our trucks. We're going to starve to death. You can say, oh my God, we're going to all starve to death. Or you can say, wait a minute. You can have some confidence that people will wake up to this and say, wait a minute, this is nonsense. We're going to counter this.
Right.
And the thing is, yeah, it could get bad. There could be civil war. You got Alexander Dugin in Russia saying, oh, you in America, you need a civil war. And they're trying to see, they're not stupid in their active measures. They're feeding the American right and the European right lies. See, it's not just that they dupe the left. We know the communists have always duped the left. They're duping the right now. Now you've got a majority of the Republican majority in the House voting against aid for Ukraine. That is like shooting yourself in the head. So they can get us to now cut off a natural ally that they're fighting a war with. We can, by feeding us this narrative. So you see, the problem with us, both the right and the left, is that we believe communist lies. Both right and left. We're both guilty. You want to say they're all evil on the left. No, you're evil too, because you believe the communist lies. You just believe a different set of them.
Right.
Because they've bifurcated it. What they've got is they've got a set of lies and propaganda they're working on the right, and they've got a set of lies and propaganda working on the left, and they want a civil war between us. Here in America, they're in Europe. So when Alexander Dugin rubbing his hands, oh, you need a civil war in America. Well, always ask a question with any piece of information, cui bono, which is Latin for who benefits. Right. Who benefits from a civil war? Who benefits from a narrative of despair in America? Who benefits from these different narratives? Moscow and Beijing.
Okay.
Our enemies. So everything you hear, first of all, there is so much disinformation. Make sure it's true. Check your facts. And then see, a lot of times the facts are true, but it's the interpretation that's wrong. So we look at the set of facts, and it's about clarity. It's like you can be given a narrative to understand facts that will lead you to destroy yourself or to benefit your enemy. And the thing is, the people on the left are Americans too, and the people on the right are Americans too. And wait a minute, they're playing us against each other. They're using race. They're using sex. They're using every trick in the book. And the fact is, they want us to be alienated and to feel despair and hopelessness. So we'll grab our guns and start shooting each other.
I see your point. Okay.
Right. And that is in the, right. And why do they use, you might ask, well, why don't they just attack us in a straight fight? Because they wouldn't win. So they have this bag of tricks, because when you are the weaker side, because you're autocratic and you're communist, you've got a bad economy because you do allow capitalism, but you want to control it, right? You want to have state control over it. And so you hurt yourself that way. And then you have this top-down military system where even the generals aren't allowed to think for themselves, which can't win a war. So you need this bag of tricks. You need your enemy to do himself in order to, and so Chairman Mao, it's called the Yin and Way. You've probably heard of the Yin and Way. There's a book by that title written by a Peruvian Marxist who sat through Mao's lectures in the 1930s and 40s. And this is what Mao would say. He'd say, we must align ourselves with the capitalists. What? He says, why sew up their pockets? Help them get rich. You got this ambitious guy. He wants to be a big businessman, or he already has a business and he wants to get rich. Well, we communists should be the ones to step forward, and we're your best friend. We're going to help you get rich. And Mao says, but wait a minute, we're Marxists. How can we do this? Oh, this is very easy. The capitalists will give us the political positions and the policies we need to take over. So we will make the capitalist rich on Friday. He will congratulate himself on Saturday. We will take power on Sunday. And on Monday, we will execute him. And all of his, you see what I'm saying? And this is literally what Mao was saying, the Yin and Way. We align with the drug traffickers and the criminals and the capitalists and all the people who want to make money, and we help them make money, but they help us into power. And then we just shoot them all.
Okay, well, on that note, we're going to have to finish our interview.
That's fine. So we understand the big picture, because if we talk about the little stuff, not the big stuff, we won't put it together right.
Your perspective is quite insightful, and I really do appreciate the kind of the insight that you bring to these issues, because it is confusing. I just, all these, Ukraine, you hear the exact polar opposite. I read the exact polar opposite on these issues almost every single day.
Oh yeah.
And it's hard to really figure out what's really, really going on. But I think you've helped us. You've helped me, I would say. Let me show your website. I do recommend that you, our audience, check it out. Let me share that. Hold on. Yeah, this is your J R Nyquist blog. J R Nyquist .blog. Okay, so thank you so much, Mr. Nyquist. I look forward to talking with you again.
All right. Well, thank you for having me.
Thank you.